The Great Hall of the Unified Council stretched for nearly a kilometer. Thousands of seats rose in circles around the central platform, each filled with beings from across the galaxy. Some had scales. Some had feathers. Some had no bodies at all, just floating clouds of light that spoke through machines. They had gathered here for 10,000 years to debate, to trade, and to decide the fate of star systems. Today, they gathered to discuss humanity. Counselor Veth stood at the central platform. His green scales caught the light as he moved. His people, the Rethani, had been part of the council for 6,000 years. They were old. They were powerful. And they had no patience for the strange, quiet species from the edge of the galaxy. 400 years, Veth said. His voice echoed through the hall. 400 years since humanity discovered faster than light travel. 400 years since we sent them our first invitation to join the council. And in all that time, what have they done? He paused. The hall was silent. Nothing. Veth spread his clawed hands. They sit on their single planet. They mine their single moon. They send a handful of traders to our stations, buy what they need, and leave. They do not expand. They do not conquer. They do not even talk to us unless we talk first. A murmur ran through the crowd. Veth continued. Some of you call them peaceful. Some of you call them wise. I call them what they are. Weak. Irrelevant. A dead branch on the great tree of galactic civilization. In the far corner of the hall, in a small section reserved for observer species, a young woman sat alone. Her name was Yuna. She was 26 years old, and she was one of only 12 humans who had ever set foot in the council chamber. She listened to Veth's words. She did not react. She had been trained not to react. I propose, Veth said, that we stop wasting resources on humanity. No more invitations. No more diplomatic missions. Let them rot in their silence until they fade away like so many species before them. The vote was quick. The motion passed with an overwhelming majority. Humanity was officially declared irrelevant. Yuna stood up. She walked out of the chamber without looking back. She did not let them see her hands shaking. The journey back to Earth took 3 weeks. Yuna spent most of it alone in her small cabin, watching old recordings. She watched humanity's first contact with alien life. She watched the celebrations. She watched the hope in people's eyes. Then she watched the silence begin. It happened slowly at first. Humanity stopped sending exploration ships. They stopped answering some of the Council's messages. They pulled their few colonies back to the solar system. Within 50 years, they had retreated almost completely from galactic society. Nobody knew why. The Council assumed humanity had simply given up. They were too primitive, too scared, too small to compete with the great civilizations of the galaxy. Yuna knew this was wrong. She had grown up on Earth. She had seen the cities, the technology, the quiet strength of her people. Humanity was not weak. They were hiding something. When her ship landed in Seoul, Yuna went straight to the Ministry of Defense. The building was old, built in a style that had not been popular for centuries. But it was solid, strong, like everything on Earth. She found Doan in his office on the top floor. He was an old man, nearly 90, but his eyes were sharp. He had served as defense minister for 40 years. Before that, he had been a soldier. Before that, his records were classified. I watched the council meeting, he said before Yuna could speak. Sit down. Yuna sat. They called us irrelevant. Yes. They said we were weak. Yes. Yuna leaned forward. Why do we let them think that? Why do we hide? I've seen our cities. I've seen our ships. We're not primitive. We're not scared. So why do we act like we are? Dohan was quiet for a long moment. He looked out the window at the city below. Flying cars moved silently between towers of glass and steel. Children played in parks that floated 100 meters in the air. It was a peaceful scene. A happy scene. How old are you, Yuna? He asked. 26. Do you know what happened 412 years ago? Yuna thought. We discovered faster than light travel. Yes, but that is not what I meant. Dawn stood up slowly. Come with me. There is something you need to see. They took an elevator down. It went far below the building, far below the city, deep into the rock beneath. When the doors opened, Yuna found herself in a long hallway lined with metal doors. This is the archive, Dawn said. Only 7 people on Earth have access to this place. Now you are the 8th. He led her to a door at the end of the hall. It opened with a soft hiss. Inside was a small room with a single chair and a large screen. Sit, Dawn said. Watch. Yuna sat. The screen flickered to life. At first, she did not understand what she was seeing. It looked like a city. Then she realized the city was on fire. Buildings collapsed. People ran through streets filled with smoke. In the sky, she saw human ships firing weapons at other human ships. This is old Moscow, Dawn said quietly. 415 years ago. The image changed. Another city. More fire. More death. Yuna saw bodies in the streets. She saw children crying. She saw soldiers shooting at shadows. Old Beijing. Another image. This time, Yuna saw a flash of light so bright it hurt her eyes even through the screen. When the light faded, there was nothing left. Just a crater where a city used to be, old New York. The images kept coming. City after city. Country after country. Yuna saw weapons that made the ground itself melt. She saw diseases that killed millions in days. She saw machines that turned people into weapons. The Third World War lasted 7 years, Dawn said. His voice was heavy. By the end, 3 billion people were dead. Half of Earth's surface was uninhabitable. We had created weapons that could crack moons. We had built viruses that could end species. We had become very, very good at killing. Yuna could not speak. Tears ran down her face. When it ended, the survivors made a choice, Dawn continued. We would never let this happen again. Not just on Earth, but anywhere. We would not spread our violence to the stars. We would not let the galaxy see what we could do. He turned off the screen. The room was dark. That is why we are silent, Yuna. Not because we are weak. Because we remember. We remember the fire and the death and the screaming. We remember what we did to ourselves. And we are terrified of what we might do to others. Yuna wiped her eyes. But the Council thinks we are nothing. Other species mock us. What if someone decides to attack us? Dawn smiled. It was a sad smile, old and tired. Then, they will learn what we have spent 4 centuries trying to forget. He walked to the door. Before he opened it, he looked back at Yuna. We are not silent because we are weak, child. We are silent because we remember what happens when we are not. The mining station was called Outpost 7. It floated at the edge of human space, far from Earth, far from help. 300 people lived there. They dug ice from asteroids and sent it back to the inner planets. It was boring work, safe work. The kind of work that let you forget the universe was full of things that wanted to hurt you. Hyam was an engineer. He had worked on Outpost 7 for 6 years. He knew every pipe, every wire, every bolt in the station. He knew the sounds it made when it was healthy and the sounds it made when something was wrong. That morning, he heard a sound he had never heard before. It was a deep rumble, like thunder in space. Then the lights went out. What was that? Someone shouted in the darkness. Hyam pulled out his emergency light. Red emergency bulbs flickered on along the walls. Through the window, he saw something that made his blood freeze. Ships. Dozens of them. They were huge and ugly, covered in spikes and weapons. They did not look like any ships Hyan had ever seen. As he watched, one of them fired. A beam of yellow light hit the station's communication tower. The tower exploded into dust. "We're under attack." Someone screamed. Hyan ran. He knew the station would not last long. Those ships were military. Outpost 7 had no weapons, no shields, nothing but rock and ice and 300 scared people. He found his sister in the cargo bay. Sora was a shuttle pilot. She was already climbing into her small ship when Hyan reached her. "Get in," she said. Her voice was calm, but her hands were shaking. "We need to warn Earth." "We can't leave everyone," Hyan said. Sora grabbed his arm. Her eyes were wet. "We can't save everyone either. If we don't warn Earth, this will happen again. Get in." Hyan looked back at the station. He could hear people screaming. He could see alien soldiers in heavy armor cutting through the airlock. He made a choice he would regret for the rest of his life. He got in the shuttle. Sora flew like she had never flown before. She dodged between asteroids. She pushed the engines until they screamed. Behind them, the alien ships were too busy with the station to chase one small shuttle. Through the rear camera, Hyan watched Outpost 7 die. He saw the aliens drag people out of the station. He saw them line up the workers in the cargo bay. He saw the flash of weapons. Then the station exploded, and there was nothing left to see. Sora did not speak for 3 hours. She just flew, her eyes fixed on the stars ahead. When she finally opened her mouth, her voice was hollow. "They killed them. They killed everyone." Hyan could not answer. He was watching a transmission on the shuttle's small screen. The aliens were broadcasting to the entire galaxy. They called themselves the Kreth Dominion. They said they were the strongest civilization in the universe. They said humanity was weak and pathetic and deserved to die. Then they showed the executions. Hyan turned off the screen. He could not watch anymore. The shuttle's engines failed near Mars. Sora managed to crash land on a small colony, more falling than flying. Rescue teams found them 2 hours later, half frozen and barely alive. When Hyan woke up in the hospital, he learned that Outpost 7 was not the only target. The Kreth had attacked 3 mining stations at the same time. Over 1,000 humans were dead. The survivors were being held as prisoners somewhere in Kreth space. Earth was in chaos. Yuna watched the emergency session of the World Council from her office in Seoul. Every leader on the planet was there. Some were crying. Some were shouting. Some sat in silence, too shocked to speak. "We must respond," said the president of the European Federation. "We cannot let this stand." "Respond with what?" asked the Prime Minister of Japan. "We have no military. We have no weapons. We gave all of that up centuries ago. Then we build new ones," someone else said. "That would take years, decades. The Kreth will be here long before then." The arguments went on for hours. Yuna listened to all of it. She thought about what Doan had shown her. She thought about the fire and the death and the weapons that could crack moons. Finally, she could not stay silent anymore. "We don't need to build new weapons," she said. Her voice was quiet, but the room fell silent. "We already have them." Every eye turned to her. "What are you talking about?" the president asked. Yuna looked at Dawn. He was sitting in the corner, watching her with tired eyes. He nodded slowly. 400 years ago, Yuna said, "we did not destroy our weapons. We hid them." The room exploded into noise. Questions, demands, accusations. But Yuna kept talking. The vaults, deep beneath every continent. filled with ships and weapons and technology we developed during the last war. We sealed them away because we were ashamed, because we were scared of ourselves. But they are still there, waiting. The Prime Minister stood up. His face was pale. You're telling me we've had weapons this whole time? While our people were being murdered. We hoped we would never need them, Dohan said. He stood up slowly, leaning on his cane. We hoped the galaxy would leave us alone. We were wrong. Then open the vaults, the president said. Open them now. Dohan closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were filled with something Yuna had never seen before. It was not anger. It was not fear. It was grief. The grief of a man who knew what was about to happen and could not stop it. I will need the authorization of every government on Earth, he said. And I need you all to understand what this means. Once we open the vaults, the galaxy will see what we really are. They will see the weapons we created. They will see the power we have hidden. And they will be afraid of us forever. Good, said the Prime Minister. Let them be afraid. One by one, every leader in the room gave their authorization. The decision was unanimous. For the first time in 400 years, humanity would show its teeth. That night, in mountains and deserts and ocean floors all across Earth, ancient machines began to wake. Doors that had been sealed for centuries groaned and cracked. Lights flickered on in darkness that had lasted generations deep beneath the mountains of Korea. In a cavern, the size of a city, Commander Tyke stood before a wall of screens. He was 62 years old. He had joined the military as a young man, expecting a quiet career of training and exercises. He had never fired a weapon at another living being. Now he watched as ships rose from the ground around him. Thousands of them. Each one was larger than anything the galaxy had ever seen. Each one carried weapons that could burn worlds. All systems online, a technician reported. The fleet is ready. Tyke felt something cold settle in his chest. He had read the histories. He knew what these ships had done in the last war. He knew the death they carried. God forgive us, he whispered. We're really doing this. Behind him, the great doors of the vault opened to the night sky. Stars shone down on machines of war that had slept for 400 years. The silence was over. The galaxy watched in confusion as Earth transformed. Satellites from a dozen species circled the small blue planet, sending images back to their homeworlds. What they showed made no sense. Massive doors were opening in mountains. Ships were rising from oceans. Structures that had looked like cities were folding apart to reveal hangars filled with war machines. This is impossible, Counselor Veth said. He stood in the council chamber, watching the feeds with growing horror. We have watched Earth for 400 years. We saw nothing. Nothing. They hid it, another counselor said. Her voice was barely a whisper. They hid it all. On Earth, Admiral Jisoo stood in the command center of the First Fleet. She was 58 years old, with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen too much. She had retired 10 years ago, expecting to spend her remaining years teaching history to young students. Now she wore her uniform again. It still fit perfectly. Status report, she said. All 12 fleets are online, her aide reported. 40,000 ships total. Weapons systems at full power. Jump drives ready. 40,000 ships. Jisoo remembered reading about the Third World War. At its height, humanity had fielded over 100,000 vessels. They had fought each other across the solar system, burning moons and cracking asteroids. By the end, less than 1,000 ships remained on either side. The survivors had built new fleets in secret. Not for conquest. Not for expansion. Just in case someone tried to hurt humanity again. Where is Dr. Yoonji? Jisoo asked. In the weapons bay. She's running final checks. Jisoo walked through the ship. It was called the Sunrise, and it was the largest vessel humanity had ever built. 2 kilometers long, bristling with weapons that could punch holes in planets. Her grandmother had helped design it, back before the silence began. She found Yoonji in a room filled with glowing screens. The young scientist looked exhausted. She had not slept in 3 days. "The weapons are ready," Yoonji said without looking up. "All of them. All of them," Jisoo repeated. "Even the Starfire?" Yoonji finally met her eyes. There was something haunted in her expression. "Yes, even that. Starfire. The weapon that had ended the Third World War. It did not destroy matter. It erased it. Ships hit by Starfire simply stopped existing. Cities vanished without rubble or ash. There was nothing left to bury, nothing left to mourn. Humanity had sworn never to use it again. They had locked the technology away with everything else, hoping it would rust and rot and be forgotten. But the Kreth had killed their children. They had murdered civilians and broadcast the executions to the galaxy. And now humanity remembered why they had built Starfire in the first place. "Thank you, Yoonji," Jisoo said. "Get some rest. We leave in 6 hours." She returned to the command center. A young pilot was waiting for her there. His name was Minho, and he was 23 years old. He had trained on simulators for 5 years, but he had never flown in a real battle. None of them had. "Admiral," Minho said. His voice was steady, but Jisoo could see his hands trembling. "The squadron is ready." "Good. How do you feel?" Minho was quiet for a moment. "Scared," he admitted. "I've seen the videos from the mining stations. I know what the Kreth did, but I'm still scared." Jisoo put a hand on his shoulder. "Good. Fear means you understand what war really is. The ones who aren't scared are the ones who get themselves killed." She looked out the window at the fleet gathering in orbit. Ships of every size, from small fighters to massive carriers. More firepower than the entire Galactic Council had ever seen gathered in one place. "My grandmother fought in the last war," Jisoo said quietly. "She told me stories when I was young. About the friends she lost. About the things she had to do. She never recovered. Not really. She spent the rest of her life trying to make sure no one would ever have to fight like that again." She turned back to Minho. "We're doing this for her. For everyone who fought and died to give us 400 years of peace. The Kreth think we're weak because we chose not to fight. They're about to learn what happens when we stop choosing." The hours passed quickly. Ships finished loading. Crews reported to stations. Pilots climbed into their fighters and ran through their checklists one last time. And then Jisoo gave the order everyone had been waiting for. "Send the message." A single transmission went out from Earth. It crossed the galaxy at faster than light speeds, reaching every species, every planet, every ship with a receiver. The message was simple. To the Kreth Dominion. "You have attacked our people. You have murdered our children. You have shown our dead to the galaxy. We demand the return of all prisoners. We demand your complete withdrawal from human space. You have 1 rotation to comply. If you refuse, we will come for you. And we will not stop until there is nothing left." The message was signed by every government on Earth. The Kreth response came within the hour. It was a video showing more executions. More prisoners dying for the amusement of aliens, who thought humanity would never fight back. Jisoo watched the video without expression. When it ended, she turned to her crew. "All fleets, prepare for jump. Destination, Kreth Prime." 40,000 ships powered up their drives. The largest fleet in galactic history prepared to move. Minho sat in his fighter, hands tight on the controls. Around him, thousands of other pilots did the same. They were young and old, men and women, People who had never wanted to fight but would not stand by while their families were murdered. "This is Admiral Jesu to all ships," the radio crackled. "In a few minutes, we will jump to enemy space. Many of you have never seen combat. Many of you are afraid. That is okay. Fear keeps you alive." Her voice grew harder. "But remember why we are doing this. Remember the faces of the dead. Remember the children who will never come home. The Kreth wanted to show the galaxy that humanity is weak. Today, we show them the truth." Minho closed his eyes. He thought of his parents back on Earth. He thought of his little sister who wanted to be a doctor. He thought of all the people he was fighting to protect. "All ships, jump in 30 seconds. The countdown began. Minho felt his heart beating so loud he thought it would burst from his chest. 10 seconds. He opened his eyes. 5 seconds. Around him, the stars began to blur. Jump. The fleet vanished from Earth orbit. 40,000 ships folded space itself, crossing hundreds of light years in an instant. When they emerged, the Kreth homeworld hung before them like a great red eye. Jesu looked at the planet that had caused so much pain. She thought of her grandmother. She thought of the 3 billion who had died in the last war. She thought of the miners who had just wanted to do their jobs and go home to their families. She thought of 400 years of silence, of hiding, of pretending to be weak so the galaxy would leave them alone. That time was over. All fleets, weapons free, and humanity went to war. The Kreth had ruled their region of space for 3,000 years. They had conquered 47 species. They had built an empire that stretched across 200 star systems. Their military was legendary. Their warriors were trained from birth to kill. They had never lost a war. When the human fleet appeared above Kreth Prime, Warlord Groth laughed. "Look at them," he said to his commanders. The massive screens in his war room showed the human ships, thousands of them hanging in space like a swarm of insects. They actually came. The quiet little species finally found their courage. "Oh, Lord," one of his officers said nervously, "our scouts report their numbers are much larger than expected. We may want to call for reinforcements." Groth waved his clawed hand dismissively. "Reinforcements? For this? These are the same creatures who hid in their solar system for 400 years. They have no experience in war. They have no stomach for blood. We will crush them in minutes and mount their admiral's skull in my throne room." He turned to his fleet commanders. "All ships, engage. Show these humans what real warriors can do." The Kreth fleet launched from orbit. 8,000 warships, each one battle-tested. Each one crewed by soldiers who had killed before. They moved in perfect formation, confident in their victory. Then the battle began. The first wave of Kreth ships fired their weapons at the human fleet. Energy beams crossed the void. Missiles streaked toward their targets. Railgun rounds flew at incredible speeds. None of them hit. The human ships moved like nothing the Kreth had ever seen. They did not dodge like normal vessels. They simply shifted, their drives bending space itself to slide around incoming fire. What should have been direct hits became clean misses. The Kreth's most powerful weapons struck nothing but empty void. "What is happening?" Groth demanded. "Why aren't we hitting them?" Before anyone could answer, the humans fired back. Minho watched from his fighter as the first Kreth ships died. He had expected explosions. He had expected fire and debris and the terrible beauty of space combat. Instead, the Kreth ships simply vanished. One moment they were there, massive and threatening. The next moment they were gone. No explosion, no wreckage, just empty space where a warship used to be. "Starfire," his squadron leader said over the radio. Her voice was hollow. "I read about it. I didn't believe it was real." More ships vanished. The human fleet was not fighting like a normal military force. They were fighting like surgeons, cutting away the Kreth with precise strikes that left nothing behind. For every shot the humans fired, a Kreth ship stopped existing. In the council chamber, thousands of light years away, Counselor Veth watched the battle unfold. His scales had gone pale. His claws dug into the arms of his chair. "This is not possible," he whispered. "No species has weapons like this. Not even us. Not even the ancients." "The humans do," another counselor said. "They had them all along. They had them, and they chose not to use them." The battle lasted 11 minutes. 11 minutes was all it took for humanity to destroy 80% of the Kreth's home fleet. 8,000 ships reduced to less than 2,000. And the humans had not lost a single vessel. Minho's hands were shaking on his controls. He had not fired a shot. His squadron had been held in reserve, watching as the larger ships did their terrible work. He had seen hundreds of Kreth vessels erase themselves from existence. He had watched warriors who had conquered dozens of species die without even understanding what killed them. Part of him was relieved. Another part was horrified. "All fighters move in," Admiral Jisu's voice came over the radio. "We have survivors from the mining stations on Kreth Prime. Squadron 7, you're on rescue duty." Minho pushed his fighter forward. This was what he had trained for. Not killing, but saving. He could do this. The rescue operation found 300 human prisoners in a camp on the planet's surface. They were thin and bruised and broken, but they were alive. Minho watched as medics loaded them onto shuttles, their faces filled with disbelief. "We thought no one was coming," one woman said. She was clutching Minho's arm like she was afraid he would disappear. "They told us Earth had abandoned us. They said no one cared." "We care," Minho said. "We always cared. We just had to remember how to fight." In the camp, he found bodies. Not all the prisoners had survived. Some had been executed. Some had died from their injuries. Some had simply given up hope and let themselves fade away. Minho knelt beside a young man who could not have been older than 20. He was still wearing his mining uniform. His eyes were closed. He looked like he was sleeping. Something changed in Minho at that moment. The fear he had carried since the fleet launched was still there, but now it had company. A cold, quiet anger that settled into his bones and would never fully leave. He rejoined his squadron. They completed their mission. When the shuttles were loaded and the survivors were safe, the fleet pulled back to orbit. Jisu broadcast her message to the galaxy, to all species of the Unified Council, to all civilizations watching this transmission. Humanity asked for nothing but peace. We begged to be left alone. We spent 400 years hiding our strength because we were afraid of what we might become. Her face was hard as stone. Her eyes burned. You should have listened. She turned to the planet below. The Kreth capital was in flames. Their fleet was in ruins. Their great empire had learned in 11 minutes what humanity had spent centuries trying to forget. The Kreth Dominion has surrendered unconditionally. Their prisoners have been freed. Their military has been destroyed. Let this be a lesson to anyone who thinks about attacking humanity again. She paused. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, sadder. We did not want this. We never wanted this. We built our weapons because we were afraid of ourselves, not because we wanted to use them on others. But when you kill our children, when you murder our families, when you broadcast our dead to the galaxy like entertainment, you leave us no choice. She looked directly into the camera. We are going home now. We are sealing our weapons away again. We will return to our silence and our peace and our small corner of the galaxy. But remember what you saw today. Remember what we can do when we stop being peaceful. The transmission ended. Across 12 star systems, every species watched the footage of the battle. They saw ships vanish into nothing. They saw an empire fall in minutes. They saw humanity reveal a strength that had been hidden for 400 years, and they were afraid. On Kreth Prime, Warlord Groth knelt in the ruins of his palace. His fleet was gone. His army was scattered. His empire, 3,000 years of conquest and blood, had ended in less than an hour. A human soldier stood over him. She was young, barely more than a child by Kreth standards. But she held her weapon with the calm confidence of someone who knew exactly what she was capable of. "Why?" Groth asked. His voice was broken. "Why did you hide? With power like this, you could rule the galaxy. You could have been gods." The soldier looked at him for a long moment. Then she lowered her weapon. "Because we already tried that once," she said. "It nearly destroyed us. We'd rather be forgotten than be gods." She walked away, leaving the warlord in the ashes of everything he had built. The stars themselves had burned in humanity's fury. And now the galaxy understood why the quiet species had chosen to be quiet. Some monsters do not need to roar. 1 year had passed since the stars burned. The galaxy was different now. Trade routes had shifted. Alliances had formed and broken. Species that had ignored each other for centuries suddenly found reasons to talk, to cooperate, to share their fears and their hopes. At the center of it all, humanity remained silent. Una stood in the council chamber for the second time in her life. But now, instead of sitting in the small section reserved for observers, she stood at the central platform. Every seat in the great hall was filled. Every eye was on her. Uncillor Veth sat in the front row. His scales had gone gray in the past year. He no longer carried himself with the pride of a species that had ruled for 6,000 years. He looked old, tired, afraid. "The council recognizes Ambassador Una of Earth," the speaker announced. Yuna took a breath. "Thank you for receiving me." "Thank you for coming," the speaker replied. There was something new in his voice. Respect, fear, perhaps both. "The council has prepared an offer for humanity. Full membership, permanent seats on the governing board, access to all council resources and technology. In return, we ask only for your alliance and your protection." The words hung in the air. Full membership. For 400 years, humanity had been ignored, mocked, called irrelevant. Now the most powerful organization in the galaxy was begging for their friendship. "I appreciate the offer," Una said carefully, "but I must decline." A murmur ran through the hall. The speaker leaned forward. "Decline? Ambassador, this is an unprecedented honor. No species has ever refused, and no species has ever been in our position." Una folded her hands. "You are not offering us membership because you believe in cooperation. You are offering it because you are afraid. You want us close so you can watch us. You want our weapons to protect you from the next threat." She shook her head. "Humanity has spent 400 years learning to live without war. We will not become the galaxy's guard dogs. We will not build our society around fighting other people's battles." "Then what do you want?" Beth asked. His voice was hoarse. "What does humanity want from the council?" Una looked at him. She remembered the first time she had stood in this room, listening to him call her people weak and irrelevant. She remembered the shame and the anger and the frustration. She felt none of those things now. "We want to be left alone," she said simply. "We want to trade with whoever wishes to trade. We want to talk with whoever wishes to talk. But we do not want power over others. We do not want influence or territory or control. We had all those things once, and they nearly destroyed us." She turned to address the entire hall. What happened at Kreth Prime was not a victory. It was a tragedy. Yes, we saved our people. Yes, we stopped a threat. But we also killed millions. We erased ships full of living beings from existence. We reminded ourselves of exactly what we are capable of. Her voice grew softer. That is not something to celebrate. That is something to mourn. The council had no response. Yuna nodded once and left the platform. She walked out of the chamber the same way she had walked out a year ago. But this time, her hands were not shaking. On Earth, Admiral Jisoo watched the sunrise from a hill overlooking Seoul. The city spread out below her, peaceful and bright. Children were going to school. Workers were heading to their jobs. Life continued as it always had, as if the war had never happened. A shuttle landed behind her. Minho climbed out. He was different than he had been a year ago. There were lines on his face that had not been there before. His eyes carried a weight that would never fully lift. He had seen too much. Done too much. The last of the fleet has returned to the vaults, he reported. All weapons are secured. The doors are sealed. Jisoo nodded. Good. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the city wake up. I keep thinking about the Kreth ships, Minho said quietly. The ones we erased. There were people on those ships. Soldiers, yes. But they had families. They had lives. And we just made them disappear like they never existed. I know, Jisoo said. I think about them too. Does it get easier? Jisoo was quiet for a long time. No, she finally said. It doesn't, and it shouldn't. The moment it becomes easy to kill is the moment we lose what makes us human. She turned to face him. That's why we seal the weapons away. That's why we choose silence. Not because we're weak, but because we understand the cost of strength. Every species in the galaxy envies our power. They don't understand that power is not a gift. It's a burden. It's a weight we carry for the rest of our lives. She put a hand on his shoulder. You did well, Minho. You saved lives. You brought people home. Hold on to that. Let the rest go. Minho nodded slowly. He looked out at the peaceful city one more time. Then he returned to his shuttle and flew away. Back to a life that would never quite feel normal again. 3 months later, Do-hoon gave his final address to the people of Earth. He stood in the World Council chamber, surrounded by leaders from every nation. His hair had gone completely white. His hands trembled slightly, but his voice was strong. 400 years ago, he began, our ancestors made a choice. They looked at what they had done to each other, at the billions who had died, at the worlds they had burned, and they chose to change. They chose to hide their weapons and their power. They chose to become a quiet species in a loud galaxy. He paused, gathering his thoughts. Some called this cowardice. Some called it weakness. But I call it wisdom. We knew what we were capable of. We knew the darkness that lived inside us. And we chose to lock it away. Not because we were afraid of others, but because we were afraid of ourselves. He looked around the room at the faces of humanity's leaders. Last year, we opened the vaults. We showed the galaxy what we had hidden. We reminded ourselves and everyone else of the terrible things we can do when we stop choosing peace. His voice grew heavy. That was necessary. Our people were dying. Our children were being murdered. We had no choice but to respond. He straightened up, his old soldier's spine still strong after all these years. But now the vaults are sealed again. The weapons sleep. The ships wait in darkness for a day we hope will never come. We return to our silence, older and sadder and wiser than we were before. He smiled slightly. The galaxy is watching us now. Some worship us as gods. Some hate us as monsters. Most simply fear us, wondering when we will wake again. He shook his head. They don't understand. We are not asleep because we cannot wake. We are asleep because we know what happens when we dream. Our dreams are nightmares, filled with fire and death and the screams of billions. His final words echoed through the chamber. We choose silence. We choose peace. We choose to remember our past so we never repeat it. And if anyone ever threatens our children again, we will show them exactly why that choice was the most frightening thing about us. He stepped down from the platform. The room was silent. Far across the galaxy, on a small world at the edge of Kreth space, a child looked up at the stars. The child was young, barely old enough to understand the stories the adults told in whispers. "What's that star?" the child asked, pointing at a distant yellow dot. The parent looked up. The star was small and dim, barely visible among the thousands of others. But the parent recognized it immediately. Everyone in the Kreth territories did. "That is Sol," the parent said quietly. "The son of the humans. The humans who beat us in the war?" "Yes." The child thought about this for a moment. "Are they scary?" The parent was quiet for a long time. The parent thought about the videos from the battle, the ships that vanished into nothing, the empire that fell in 11 minutes. The parent thought about the soldiers who had marched through their streets, stern but not cruel, dangerous but not violent. "They are quiet," the parent finally said. "They stay in their little corner of the galaxy, and they do not bother anyone. Then why is everyone so scared of them?" The parent looked at the distant yellow star. In its dim light, billions of humans were living their lives, raising their children, dreaming their dreams. They were not building weapons. They were not planning conquests. They were simply existing, peaceful and silent, and more dangerous than anything the galaxy had ever known. "Because," the parent said softly, "the quiet ones are always the most frightening. They have nothing to prove. They have nothing to fear. And when you make them angry..." The parent trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. The child looked at the star for a long moment. Then the child turned away and went inside to sleep, but the parent stayed, watching the distant sun until it set below the horizon. In the darkness, the parent whispered a prayer that had become common among the Kreth in the past year. Let them stay silent. Let them stay peaceful. Let them never have a reason to wake again. Across the void, humanity slept, and the galaxy held its breath, hoping the dreams would stay quiet for another 400 years.